Presentation by Kendra Arnson and John Tesvich regarding the Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion Project. Councilmember Lapine.
I'm going to go around. Hold on one second.
Okay, we moving. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Kendra Arneson's here. I also put the John Tesevich, he's out of the town, out of the country. I think you and Mr. Ricks will speak today on the diversion. We actually give you a short, condensed version, but we appreciate your effort, and the floor is yours, Ms. Kendra.
Thank you, Councilman Lapine. I'm actually going to sit this part out and come in on the public comment period. Captain George Ricks with the Save Louisiana Coalition will be giving the presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ricks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Mr. Lapine. Appreciate the opportunity to give this presentation. I'll be as brief as I possibly can, but it's a very important issue. It's probably the most important issue you're going to face in the next decade in Plaquemines Parish. It's going to affect Plaquemines, not only Plaquemines Parish, but St. Bernard also. What I'm going to show you in this presentation is not speculation. It's actual graphs, photographs, charts, some from USGS, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, and actually the only computer modeling you will see in here is actually CPRA and Corps of Engineers computer modeling. What I'm going to show you here is the reason why President Cormier is concerned, members of the fishing community are very concerned, and why you should be concerned too. Not only what it's going to do to our fishing industries, but what it's going to do economically to this parish as well as St. Bernard Parish. Before we go into the presentation, you've all heard the marketing campaign and the romantic notion that we have to reconnect the river to the marsh because that's how the delta was built. And while you may believe that river diversions may be the cure for our coastal issues, I'm going to be like the old Paul Harvey newscaster. You're going to see the other side of the story, one that you don't hear from the CPRA in the state. Let's get started. Louisiana is the most productive fishery in the Gulf. The shrimp, oyster, and crab industries account for over 20,000 jobs in Louisiana. Whether you know it or not, Plaquemines is a home to the largest commercial fishing fleet in the lower 48 states and accounts for 70% of the state's commercial landing, shrimp, oysters, crabs, and fish. Our commercial fishing statistics in Plaquemines, this is the year 2016. Saltwater fish, there were 308 producers, over 2 million pounds of landings, over $1 million of value. Shrimp, 657 producers, $20 million of value, 20 million pounds, $30 million in value. Oysters, 313 producers, 3 million pounds, 24 million, a total of over 1,278 producers with landing value of over $56 million annually to this parish. If you look here, the total economic impact of the fisheries industries, this is by the region, Orleans, Plaquemines, St. Bernard, and the region. I want you to pay special attention, ladies and gentlemen, to the state and local taxes. There's $43 million annually to this parish from our fisheries. I know this parish, as well as other parishes, have economic woes. Can you afford that kind of hit to your economic base? And the reason why it's in danger and why we're going to lose it, you're looking at here the Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion. This is the project details of the project. It's going to be built at a cost of $1.3 billion and have a flow of 75,000 cubic feet a second. Now, to put that in perspective, the largest two diversions that we have in operation right now is Davis Pond, which is only 10,000 cubic feet a second, and the Carnarvon diversion at 8,000 cubic feet a second. Here's the footprint of the diversion, as you see just north of Ironton. There's many engineering details that had to be carried out. They had to relocate the railroad tracks. They had to do the bridge to the structure. But this is the footprint of the project. Now, time frame wise, the environmental impact study could be completed as soon as the fall of 2020. Engineering design a little bit earlier than that. So technically, they could start construction in the fall of 2020. Now, there is a little deception involved, you know, when you hear the operational regime of these diversions. While it seems, well, you know, tolerable that the CPRA says, well, we're going to operate these things only when the river's at 1 million cubic feet a second at 75,000 maximum. But what you don't see in the fine print, year round, they're going to run this thing at base flow of 5,000 cubic feet a second year round. Year round, 5,000. Carnarvon is only 8,000 cubic feet a second. They're going to run it at 5,000 year round. Now, here's what the operation regime says. The maximum capacity will only be occurred during infrequent instances when the Mississippi River is flowing at high river stages of approximately 1 million cubic feet a second or more. Now, that sounds like, oh, well, we're not going to run it that much. Okay, infrequent. That's the term you have to pay attention to. I'm going to show you how infrequent that is. This is a USGS chart of the Mississippi River flow at Belle Chase, at which point they're going to gauge how they're going to operate this diversion. What you see here is this past year from February 3rd to August the 28th. That red line you see is how long they could have operated the diversion at maximum flow. Is that infrequent to you? That's 60 consecutive days. Now, the present diversion we have at Carnarvon, we know, you know, we've seen what the present diversions have done. This is the Delacroix area. This aerial photograph was taken courtesy of standard mapping in 1998. You see the landmass that was located in the Delacroix area. You see up in the upper left-hand corner is the diversion outfall from Carnarvon. Now, this is only 8,000 cubic feet a second. This diversion went in operation in 1991. For the first 5 years, they operated it correctly. They would open up for a certain period of time till the salinity levels got to where it was supposed to be, and then they would shut it down completely. In 1995, they started operating it at full capacity, not full capacity, but year-round. They constantly flowed the diversion and flooded the marsh with river water. This is what happened. This is what it looked like in 2011. I'm going to show you that again. Before, after. Scientists have studied what happened. This was after Hurricane Katrina. You think it happened in 13 years, what it says 1998 to 2011. No, it happened virtually overnight when Hurricane Katrina came in. There you see August and September of 2005. That's Landsat photographs. We lost 42 square miles of wetlands overnight when Katrina came in. They did scientific studies to find out why that happened, and what they attributed it to was the fresh water and the nutrient load of the Mississippi River water from the Carnarvon diversion flooding the brackish water marsh and affecting the root systems that couldn't stand up to storm surge after, and the land rolled up like a carpet. As you see here, this was land marsh that's influenced by the Carnarvon diversion after Hurricane Gustav. It was virtually wiped out. What you see in the bottom photograph is marsh that's not affected by the river water in the Delacroix area after Hurricane Katrina. It was still there. Now, this is a Corps of Engineers chart. You see the red. That was land loss after Hurricane Katrina. That yellow line you see is the I path of Hurricane Katrina. You see the red is wetland loss. It was all in the vicinity of the Carnarvon diversion. You see the green on the right of your screen, that's high salinity wetlands that were not affected by the storm surge. This is an expanded view of it. This is from a study of hurricane-induced land loss that you have a copy of in your packet, by the way. The blue line is the eye of Hurricane Katrina. Every mass of red that you see on this map was land loss after Hurricane Katrina. And it's all influenced by river water. You see the poster child for diversion, the Wax Lake on the left, suffered land loss, the Birdsfoot Delta. Anywhere that was influenced by river water sustained land loss. Now, why, that blue line, as I said, is the I path. Why did, above Mr. Go, you see on the map, why didn't that suffer land loss? You know, river water wasn't a problem. We have over 5 natural crevasses that flow 24/7. Over 450,000 cubic feet a second flow through these 5 natural crevasses. And they're also suffering the most land loss in the state. Now, we talk about the river water like, oh, fresh water. They call it fresh water. We're going to flow fresh water. Okay, is the river fresh water? Yes, we drink it. It's treated. But here's a study that was done by Environment Missouri. In 2010, there was over 12.7 million pounds of toxic chemicals dumped into the Mississippi River. Nitrates, arsenic, benzene, and mercury. The nitrates are what cause the dead zone in the Gulf every year. This is what the dead zone looks like. Now, I gave a presentation to BISCO a couple of years ago, and I had a high school student that asked me, is any state on the Gulf Coast suffering more land loss than Louisiana? Louisiana has 43% of the coastal wetlands in the United States, yet we suffer 93% of the land loss. Why is that? Could that be a problem? You see the red. No other Gulf Coast state suffers that much land loss. And what do we have that every other state doesn't have? The Mississippi River. The dead zone, as we talk about, every year we have a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. Dr. Denise Reed, I had an argument with her years ago. She was then head of the audience to the Gulf and said dead zones couldn't form in shallow water. Chandelier and Breton Sound are virtually shallow estuaries, and every year they have a hypoxic zone. This is a map from Louisiana Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation, and it shows 2 dead zones that formed between June 13th and 23rd of 2013. The same time frame these 2 dead zones formed, that's what we had in Chandelier Sound. We had a massive fish kill, all bottom fish, redfish, drum. Now, the state knows there's going to be impacts. I mean, it's common sense. May 22nd, the head of the CPRA was here in Plaquemines Parish at the PABI meeting, and this was his quote. Obviously, yes, if we have too much fresh water, you have no more oysters. That's just common sense. Well, we know that, Mr. Bradbury. We've seen what's happened. This is a oyster stock assessment from Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. This is CSA 1 South, which was once the most productive oyster seed grounds in the country, not just the state. 80% of the public seed oysters used to come from this area. Bay Gardine, American Bay, Bay Crab. You see the bottom right-hand corner, 2011, Mardi Gras Pass came to be. Started dumping river water into that area. And since then, we've lost that public oyster seed ground. Let's talk about shrimp. This is the latest Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries shrimp landings data. 2017, the brown and white shrimp accounted for over $133 million to the state. Of that $133 million, $22.2 million was just the brown shrimp. Now, anyone in the shrimping industry knows brown shrimp is the first season. Now, of that $22.2 million, 40% came from Barataria Bay. Now, that's $9 million annually, gentlemen, comes out of Barataria Bay to this parish. Now, why we're going to lose it? This is why we're going to lose it. This is actual computer models from the Corps of Engineers. You see the two logos on the bottom, CPRA and the Corps of Engineers. This is their own computer modeling of what the salinity is going to be in Barataria Bay with the diversion. On the lower right-hand corner, that's the year 2020 from April to June with the Mid-Barataria diversion in operation. Barataria Bay is totally fresh all the way to Grand Isle. Talk about Carnarvon. During the oil spill in 2010, Carnarvon was operated, now this is 8,000 cubic feet a second. It was operated from April the 29th to August the 5th at 8,000 cubic feet a second. To give you an idea of what only 8,000 cubic feet a second does to salinity levels. The graph at the bottom is Four Horse Lake. You see the salinity levels in a matter of days went to 0. Now, how far is Four Horse Lake from the Carnarvon outfall? Carnarvon outfall is up in the left-hand corner. This is how much of that area was turned fresh in a matter of 3 to 4 days. 16 miles. Now, it's only 8,000 cubic feet a second. Can you imagine what 75,000 cubic feet a second is going to do? 3 days later, all the way to American Bay was totally fresh. That's a distance of 23 miles. We first started the Save Louisiana Coalition in 2013, and I went around and started giving these presentations, and people were telling me I was Chicken Little. I didn't know what I was talking about. I was crying wolf, that all of our concerns weren't warranted, that I didn't know what I was talking about. I was just a charter captain. Well, in June of 2013, the National Marine Fisheries Service wrote this letter to the CPRA and mirrored every concern that I had raised. The biggest part of this letter, the most important part, says this is their concerns with the Mid-Barataria diversion at 75,000 cubic feet a second. Their concerns were, one, to displace marine fishery species from currently productive habitats to less supported habitats. 2, reduce marine fisheries productivity. 3, convert essential fish habitat, which the Barataria Basin is, to areas no longer supportive of some federally managed marine fishery species and their prey items. Render wetlands impacted by diversion more susceptible to erosion from storms. Degrade water quality. And 6, the most important one, cause socioeconomic hardship to those involved in the commercial and recreational fishing industries. And I've shown you what these commercial fishing industries mean to your parish tax-wise, not even getting into the recreational fishing. Now, Water Institute of Gulf had hired a scientific panel, expert scientific panel on diversions. They had a series of 7 meetings. And each one of these meetings, the CPRA presented findings and studies. The panel report on every one of these meetings stressed uncertainties. Uncertainties due to the absence of land building analogs. Uncertainties to ecological outcomes. Uncertainty in social and economic outcomes. And design and operational uncertainties. Their final recommendation was it needs more study. It needs more study. Yet they're going to fast track. They're going to fast track this diversion. They claim that diversions are more economical in the long run. Okay, we get more bang for the buck with the diversion. His was a study that was done by Rex Caffrey from LSU and 2 other PhDs that said no, over a 50-year period, dredging is actually more economical to diversion when you take into consideration the economic impact of the diversions. Chris Wazinski, U.S. Geological Survey. It seems everyone is just taking for granted the slogan, put the river back in the marsh, is the key to addressing the problem, without ever going out in a scientific way to find out what they would do. It's inconceivable to me that that would happen, but apparently it has. Now, this was a study done by Gary Brown with the Corps of Engineers. It also says that operation of diversions tend to freshen the entire basin, but the most important part of this study, significant land loss is expected to continue with or without these diversions. Now, what are we going to get? What you see here, that little blue dot, hypothetically, that's how much land you're going to get in 45 years at 45,000 cubic feet a second, run 365 days, 7 days a week. Is it worth it? What you see here, that's the Shell Island East project. They had a bulldozer running on land in 4 days where it was open water. That's what we can do. Now you have to ask yourself, ladies and gentlemen, if diversions are the cure to our coastal issues, what good is the medicine if it kills the patient? Any questions? I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you, Captain. Any questions from the table, comments from the table right now? I think we have one more presentation to follow up on yours. Mr. Savastano, we can go to that presentation if you want to. I'm sure you'll stick around if there's any questions. Ms. Toops, are we prepared for that one?
Good afternoon. I'd like to add a little bit to Captain Rick's presentation. First of all, the Myrtle Grove diversion is going to be a complete failure, period. The data is, the handwriting is on the wall. He's presented enough information to show you that it's not going to be successful. The real problem is high volumes of water into a brackish saltwater estuary, both sides of the rivers. What that does to the estuary, number one, he showed you that it's going to run the salinities to 0 to Grand Isle. The immediate result is what the fishermen are concerned with. The fisheries are destroyed immediately. So it's not going to take long. All of the marine resources, the adults, they're going out in the Gulf, if they can move fast enough. The oysters can't move. They're dead. They're dead immediately. The nursery ground as a habitat is turned into fresh water, so you won't get any shrimp larvae coming in and produced. That's gone. So that's all essential fishery habitat for shrimp. Magnuson-Stevens Act protects that. It's going to be totally destroyed. So it's a violation of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. Now, the CPRA, the first thing they're going to tell you, what George said, they're connecting the river to the marshes because that's the way the delta was built. They're not going to tell you there's only 1/4 of the silt in the river that it used to be, and we have all the pollutions, heavy metals, fertilizers, and so on, which causes dead zones and all the other criteria, which I'm not going to get into. The important thing is they tell you we're going to build marsh. We're going to put sediment out there, we're going to build marsh and restore the wetlands. Okay, and by building marsh, we're going to reduce storm surge and reduce flooding, which is just opposite what's going to happen. What you have in the Barataria Bay is salt marsh at the lower regions, brackish marsh in the middle to upper regions. Salt and brackish marsh takes 5 to 15 parts salinity, salt marsh takes 16 plus parts salinity. Both of them have deep root systems. The physics, which we'll see later, is the fact that these deep root systems have soil strength which exceeds the storm stress forces by hurricanes. Fresh marsh has shallow root systems, and the soil strength is less than what the storm stress is, so it's rolled up and washed away. So when you put all this, run the salinity down to 0, you're going to kill the brackish and salt marsh, which is resilient in a storm environment. And what you're going to grow, be it so, you're going to put a lot of sediment out there. It's being transported by high volumes of water. But what you're going to grow on it, after you kill the brackish and salt marsh, you're going to grow fresh marsh. And on the new sediment you're putting out there, you're going to grow fresh marsh. What's going to happen? We're in a storm environment. First storm comes along, the soil strength is less than the storm stress. It's going to roll it up. You're going to have open water from Grand Isle all the way up. Now, is that going to knock down storm surge? Absolutely not. It's going to increase storm surge. Is it going to decrease flooding? Absolutely not. It's going to increase flooding. So everybody sitting behind the wall in Belchas, look out. It's coming if you put the big divergence in. Now, I'm going to give you a presentation, and George already gave you a lot of presentation of the science behind that. All the uncertainties that the panel has suggested, we have certainties, not uncertainties. They didn't do the research to find out what's certainly going to happen. We did. So with that, we'll go on to the presentation. I'll give you a volume, for example. At 8,000 cubic feet at Carnarvon, you're putting about 5 billion gallons of water in 24 hours into the Britain Sound estuary. At 75,000 cubic feet per second, you're putting 48.6 billion gallons of water into Barataria Bay. And one day, now we're going to run this thing, how many, 135 days or some ridiculous amount, 4 or 5 months? George showed you what happened on the east side of the river at 8,000 for the oil spill. In 60 days, ran the salinity down to 0, killed every oyster on the inside, on that side of the river. It's been dead for since 2010. The people in Point Lahash hadn't made a living, hadn't picked a sack of oysters. Talk about the culture impact, tremendous. You're going to see the same thing on this side of the river. That's why these fishermen are very, very concerned about this. You're going to have mass destruction. Now let's get into the presentation. I'll give you the science of exactly what happened. I'll skip this first slide. The things you want to remember is 3 things. Britain Sound and Barataria estuaries are brackish saltwater environments. Number two, both are located in a storm environment. We're in a storm environment. The state can't stop the storms. We're going to get them. Both contain brackish and salt marsh, which can survive the pressures of storm surge. Fresh marsh can't. It results in open water. And again, this is a similar map to what George had, but this is a satellite image in 1990 prior to Carnarvon. If you look at this map, you'll see, find this. All of the area was identified by the Corps of Engineers as the influence area about the Carnarvon Diversion, which is located right there. If you notice, the marsh is pretty much comparable out here as it is in here. And oh, that's 2008, I'm sorry. 1990, there's 1990. The marsh is pretty much comparable in there. What happened is we started, as George said, in 1995. This thing was designed to enhance oysters and to stop the predators on oysters by putting fresh water in, to reduce the salinities, run the oyster conchs off the oyster drills, off the oyster reefs. They started to run it to build land, which it wasn't designed, and the Corps engineers told them. But they started running heavily because they spent $26 million putting it in, and they wanted to run it to get the maximum results. Well, it wasn't designed for land. So what happened? This is what happened very rapidly. You're going to watch the land disappear to 2008. You're rapidly seeing the land disappear as it goes away. Now you see what happened. I want to point out something. If I can get the cursor up here. Okay. Well, it's gone away again. Anyway, if you look at the lower right-hand corner, you'll see the area that's offshore, that's salt and brackish marsh. If you look at the area that's called the influence area, that used to be brackish marsh. Something happened. The majority of the damage looked like it was in the influence area, which is where Carnarvon influenced. Let's go on, and that's starting to tell you a little bit about what's happening and what's causing the damage. I was told, number one, that we had the same kind of damage prior to Carnarvon from the storms. So I went back, and since we had Hurricane Betsy and Camille in 1956 to 1990, we had a land loss of about 350 acres per year. And I went and got the data from 1990 to 2008. We only had Katrina, and we had a land loss, our average land loss of 967 acres per year. Almost three times the land loss. Well, that's during the time that they put Katrina in. So another thing pointing to the fact that Katrina, the Carnarvon is one of the causes of the land loss. Why? Why is that? We have to get the answer to that. So here's three areas. 1990 to 2004, it looked good. The influence area, it looked like we had a 1% increase. And then in 1990 to 2008, boom, we had 36% loss. And then we go to 2004 to 2008, Katrina at 2005. 36.8%, all of it attributed to Katrina. They were right. The storm caused the damage. But why? Again, if we look where we had salt marsh, before Katrina, we lost about 3%. After all the way out to 2008, we had about a 12% loss versus a 36% loss. Again, telling that salt and brackish marsh is more stable in a storm environment. Again, This is from the USGS. Fresh marsh, in all of Louisiana, we lost 122 square miles. Intermediate marsh, which is fresh, we lost 90 square miles. Brackish marsh, we only lost 33 square miles, and saline marsh, 28 square miles. Some more data that tells you salt and brackish marsh is the kind of marsh you want in your estuary. Again, you saw this slide. Basically, you see where Katrina passed. You see the biggest damage areas, Chapalaya, Britton Sound, the Carnarvon area, and the mouth of the river. Fresh water, fresh marsh, maximum damage. Again, fresh marsh, most damage. What caused it? The 5-part salinity line on the upper right-hand corner was moved to Point LaHash. The 15-part salinity line was flushed out in Black Bay. So the high volume of water reduced the salinities, which is going to do in Barataria Bay. What happened? The upper corner in 1988, that red stuff is brackish marsh. By 2000, the green stuff replaced the red stuff. The green stuff is fresh marsh. By 2000, 2005, Katrina came, wiped out the fresh marsh. That's where the tremendous loss was. Again, you look at the map, you see all the damage in the area up on the left-hand side, and under the red area you see intermediate fresh marsh. And if you look at the right side of it, you see salt marsh, you see Katrina path. The Katrina didn't destroy the salt marsh, it destroyed the fresh marsh. So, introducing Mississippi River fresh water has significantly reduced the salinity. The lower salinity converted, again, the marshes to fresh marsh, and then the storms eliminated, the storm surge eliminated it. Essentially, on the east side of the river, 500,000 acres of essential fishery habitat is destroyed. There is no fishery on the east side of the river all the way down to Point LaHash and below. It's gone. Exactly what's going to happen in Barataria Bay, and that's why the fishermen are so concerned. I won't go into all the nutrients and the fertilizer. You know the fertilizer coming down the river causes dead zones. We're introducing dead zones into the estuary. We're introducing pollution into the estuary, heavy metals, all of that's introduced. Invasive species, we'll introduce water hyacinths, which totally block up all your canals, your lakes, and everything else. It makes them totally unusable. Finally, again, what causes the damage? Low salinity, and this is from a scientific paper by Howes, Culp, and John Barris. The bottom line tells you low salinity wetland has something like 500 to 1,450 Pascal units, which is force per square meter that it can stand. Storm stress is 425 to 3,600 Pascal units, exceeds the heck out of low salinity soil strengths, therefore it's washed out. High salinity has 4,500 Pascal units, which exceeds the storm stress forces. Therefore, that's why high salinity marsh, brackish and salt marsh, is not washed out. This is documented from scientists. And their conclusion was fresh water to marshes as part of a restoration effort weakens existing wetlands rather than vulnerable to hurricanes. And that's what you're going to get. I can go on to the solution. The Magnuson-Stevens Act says in order, if you start an operation that destroys the essential fishery wetlands, you have to either change the operation and restore it, number one, or you have to generate that number of acres somewhere else out in the country. We've destroyed 500,000 acres on the east side of the river. They're not going to generate that somewhere else in this country. That's impossible. So we need to restore it. How are we going to restore it? Stop these fresh water from going in, restore the salinity regime, grow brackish marsh on the upper regions and the estuary, salt marsh on the lower regions, do dredging, put new sediment out there and grow the proper marsh, which is resilient in the storm environment, knocks down storm surge, reduces flooding. That's the way to do it. That's the way we have to do it on the east side of the river right now, because we've destroyed. We still have a chance on the west side of the river. You still have brackish and you still have salt marsh. Keep running Davis Pond the way you're running it. It's going to do exactly what Carnarvon did on the east side of the river. It's starting to do it right now. The upper regions around all the way down to Lafitte is being destroyed. It's converting the marsh and turning it into open water. If you keep running that without even putting the big diversions, it's going to run it all the way down to Grand Isle, just like it ran to Point LaHash. It's going to destroy it. We have a little bit salt marsh in Point LaHash right now. You're concerned about Mardi Gras Pass. It's wiping out the salt marsh in Point LaHash right now, which means we'll have fresh marsh all the way from Carnarvon to Point LaHash. The next storm that comes through, open water all the way. All that fresh marsh that was converted from Grand Lake up to Carnarvon, that's open water right now. I'll give you an idea. For Katrina, we had 30 feet at Point LaHash. We had 16 feet at Carnarvon, storm surge. Knocked down, attenuated the storm surge by 14 feet. Okay? We had all the destruction to the marsh based on converting it to fresh and destroying it in open water. When Isaac came along, we had 15 feet at Point LaHash. We had 13.6 at Carnarvon. It only attenuated the storm surge by 1.4 feet, where it did 14 feet before. That's what the marsh does. It knocks down storm surge. So what are we going to do? We're going to put all this high-volume river water into estuary, into Barataria estuary. We're going to convert the marsh, turn it into fresh, destroy it, open water, and whatever you get, a storm surge at Grand Isle, you're going to get it on the levees at Belchaz. And there's the signs. End of conversation. Do you have any questions?
I do. Would you please elaborate? Hold on, Mr.
Diversion, the natural diversion at Fort St. Philip over the number of years that it was in existence?
Okay, I went and got, oh, by the way, all this data comes from the USGS. You can get the reports and get all the things, and from the Corps of Engineers. In fact, the database that I'm citing all the numbers from, this was paid for by the Corps of Engineers, and the USGS generated that from Landsat satellite data. And we have the database. I have it for the east side, but that same database exists for the west side of the river. Somebody needs to get that and go back and analyze it from the time right before they put in Davis Pond to now, to see what Davis Pond has done to you guys on the west side of the river. It's available. Now, to answer John's question, we got the data. They keep saying the levees stop the water from going over and rebuilding the wetlands. So we wanted to look at what happened down from Bohemia to Batiste Colette. We don't have very much levees, very little. We have Fort St. Philip's that puts in 100,000 cubic feet per second when the river's high. We have Batiste Colette, 90,000 cubic feet per second. So we got, quote, natural diversions. And I think George alluded to the total volume. Right now, we have more than 250,000 cubic feet per second coming in on the east side of the river based on diversions and crevasses. That's more than you have at Bonacaire Spillway open, wide open, which is 250,000 cubic feet. So every day we're getting more water into the east side of the river, this river water with fertilizers and pollutants and everything else, and converting our marsh right now than we get if we had the Bonacaire Spillway open. So we have destruction going on immediately, and you got it on the west side too. So we need to not only stop these big diversions, we need to regulate the little ones and control the crevasses that we have, or we won't have a parish very long. Just that simple. Now, to go back to John's question, we have no levees, and we've had a lot of volume, and since 1985, I had the satellite data to look at how much land we had in 1985 in water from Bohemia to Batiste Colette. And then I got the data for 2010. That's 25 years. And you would think without levees and that kind of water going from the river that we would have built land. I mean, that's what the big diversions are supposed to do. Well, in that time span, 25 years with no levees and all of this fresh water coming from the river and fairly deep to get the heaviest silt from the bottom, we actually lost 2,000 acres. So we didn't gain land, we didn't build land, we actually lost land. And the other thing I think is important, if you do nothing, which the CPRA says, you're going to have nothing in 50 years. Well, if you look at this increasing the rate of loss, if you put these diversions in, we already can show that it increased the rate of loss by a factor of 300%. So if we put that in here and we increase the rate of loss, we're going to have nothing a lot faster than if we do nothing. But we're not going to do anything. What can we do to really solve this problem? Dredge. Put the sediment out there without the high volumes of water. Without the high volumes of water, you'll keep the salinities in a proper range for growing the right marsh, which will knock down storm surge and decrease flooding. There's the solution. You won't get all the pollution, the dead zones, the fertilizer. None of that will go in with dredging because you're putting very little water. And there's the solution. Now, they keep telling us dredging costs more than diversions. But in the master plan, there's $20 billion for dredging, which is a significant amount of money out of the $50 billion. If dredging is so bad, why are we going to spend $20 billion in the rest of the state to do dredging and not satisfy Plaquemines and do the 2.4 billion or 5 billion that we have for that, and do that in Plaquemines and avoid all the problems and retain our fisheries? That's a renewable resource fisheries. Every year we make that much money. If we put that diversion in, we kill the fisheries and it's gone forever. Your tax money, the people working, all that's lost. And it's lost every year. Okay, if we do dredging, that's not lost. So what's telling us to go do diversions? Nothing. They tell us it costs more to do dredging per acre than diversions. Give us the computations, give us the dollar value per acre, and tell us how you computed that. Then let us discuss whether it's more costly or less. I think dredging is significantly less costly because you don't destroy all of these resources, renewable resources, every year that you're making money. If you count all the resources that you're destroying for 50 years and add that to diversions and subtract it from dredging, dredging becomes very, very inexpensive with respect to diversions for building land. So they won't tell you the whole story. They're not telling us the whole story. Give us the facts. Don't just give us a presentation where you build a big, massive diversion, construction, and this is what we're doing, and this is what it's going to do. It's going to connect the river to the marshes, and we're going to decrease storm surge, and we want to decrease flooding. Fallacies. Spin. Okay? Now you got the data. You can use it any way you want. And you'll get some pro-diversion people in here. Ask them to give you the science that documents what they're telling you. I don't see any signs coming out of CPRA. I see comments, subjective comments. Give us the signs. That's what you need to request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Savastano. I appreciate it. I think we do have some questions from the table.
Mr. Savastano.
And thank you, Captain, as well. And I'm glad you ended your conversation, Mr. Savastano, with that, because I think that's what I've been asking for as well, is to see the science. And we have not. So I do agree with you there. Ms. Solvent is up now. She has a comment?
Yeah.
You're on.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a quick comment. First of all, I want to applaud the fishing industry and the fishermen that's adamantly fighting and going up against the diversion. I applaud you. I support you. I think it's a worthwhile cause and it's worth fighting for. But there's one question that comes to mind for me. If Mr. Savastano would come back to the mic, I would like to know his personal opinion. Why do you feel that CPRA and all these other entities is ignoring all of the the scientific data are suppressing all of the data that's coming forth from you guys. I've been in you guys' companies many a times, and the evidence is there. It's there. Why are they ignoring it?
I suspect, and I'll give you what I think is the reason. We have something in the neighborhood of $6 billion coming in from the BP oil spill, and it's dedicated for two functions: to build barrier islands and to build diversions. It can't be used for anything else. So the state is going to get a significant portion of that $6 billion to build diversions. And if they don't build diversions, they're going to have to use it on barrier islands. And they'd like to use it on diversions because the spin is they're going to do all these things and create land at a cheaper rate, which they won't give us the data on that. So we need to get the data. Now, why are they doing that? Because they're going to hire engineering companies. And these engineering, I think you can put it together from here, can't you?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Cormier?
Yes, I want to thank Mr. Ken Savastano. He's too humble a man. He didn't state his credentials. Mr. Savastano was a physical scientist employed by the National Marine Fisheries Service, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration under the United States Department of Commerce. He also was a scientist for a while with NASA. So just because we're lucky enough to have him as a local resident in Plaquemines, I don't want anyone to think, because of his humility, that you know, the old trick is, well, if they're an expert, they come down from far away. No, Mr. Savastano has all the credentials, and Captain Ricks's efforts can't be, all of his hard work can't be understated. So I thank both of them because they have educated me on this issue, and I thank them from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. Mr. Bartholomew?
Yes. They're not on anybody's salary. They're not paid by this council. They're not paid by the state of Louisiana. They're not paid by any group. This is people that loves Louisiana, people that loves Plaquemine Parish, people that love St. Bernard, people that respect the fishing industry. It's people that works in that industry. Those people are committed to bring a life that was lost back into commerce on their efforts. So you see, they're not getting paid. So we can't say anybody paying them because they're not, because they don't want to hear this. So what I'm saying is, it's not too often we get knowledgeable people that know the science of what works. Not making assumption, not making opinion, but scientific data that proves what works. And to the two gentlemen, I really appreciate you, and I respect you 100%, or maybe 1,000, whatever, beyond for your commitment in making this fight a vulnerable opponent to the other side, because they don't know. You do. Thank y'all very much. That's all.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Lapine?
Mr. Ricks, Mr. Savastano, thank you for your presentation today. I actually sat through your presentation when you had at the auditorium, and it was my intent that all council members should hear this information. That night, when you opened my eyes and presented your information that night, and it's very overwhelming. It was a lot more intense that night. We have a lot more information that was presented. This was a kind of condensed version, but I just want to thank you for your constant awareness that you bring to us. This is not just a Plaquemines issue. This is also a St. Bernard issue. And I want to recognize a professional courtesy. There is a St. Bernard Councilman at Large, Kerry Colley, in the audience. Thank you, Kerry, for being here. Welcome to Plaquemines Parish. But Councilwoman, I apologize, Kerry. But thank you for being here. But it affects all of us. And again, thank you for your presentation. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Juneau?
Yes, sir. I'd like to thank Mr. Savastano and Mr. Ricks and all the fishermen that's here. This opened up my eyes, because I've been asking CPRA for the past year, what are they going to do to help Plaquemines Parish? What is this going to do to help us? They keep, like you say, they keep pushing it off. They also say that they're only going to open it up 40 days a year. Now, you know, I'm just as confused as y'all are. I ask them, why are you going to do something to hurt the fishermen in Plaquemines, Jefferson, and everywhere? They can't give me that answer because they said they're not going to hurt you. But I see, after all these comments, that y'all the true people and they not. Thank you.
All right, if we have no other further comments, 1 second. From the table, I'm going to open up for public comment. Before I do, as you can see, we have spent over an hour on this topic. I think it's been well needed. I think everybody on the council deserved the opportunity, like Mr. Lapine said, to hear some facts. And like Mr. Savastano duly pointed out, to provide us with some science. So I do appreciate that. We're going to try to keep the public comments to around 2 minutes per person. I'm not sure how many people are up to speak, but if you respect that, I appreciate it. Once again, I think this was a very good presentation by both Captain Ricks and Mr. Savastano. We have one final comment, I believe, from the table, Ms. Solvent, and then we'll turn it over to public comment. Ms. Solvent?
Yes, I forgot to mention early on to Captain Ricks. I want to thank you for acknowledging in your opening statement you referred to the location of the diversion as north of Ironton. I can appreciate you using that terminology, even though it may affect everybody, but we are in the closest proximity. The community of Ironton will be in the closest proximity of that diversion than anyone else. So I can appreciate your comment, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, it's open for public comment now.
Yes, Warren Lawrence, 120 Timber Canal Lane, Myrtle Grove. And what Ms. Audrey just said, the closest community to this diversion that's on the seaside is Myrtle Grove. We have for 2 years now tried to give information from CPRA. We already had 3 meetings with them to what is the effect it's going to have on our community as far as flooding. What is the hydraulic study that's going to show what will the elevation of the water be in our subdivision when they open this diversion? They had not done a hydraulic study, and they were going to get one done. It still hadn't been done. The only thing we're saying is if that diversion was operating today at the river level it's at, we couldn't get to our homes. That's what the estimated elevation of that water would be at Myrtle Grove when that river diversion is operated. Right now, when you open at Carnarvon with only 8,000 CFS, you're talking about a 2-foot elevation of water. The tide can't even come in. It's making more water. If we had it at 8,000 and we got 2 foot, we'd be semi-flooded. But if it comes at this rate, there's no way we can even attempt to live there. I'm just asking that in behalf that the president, our councilman, get with the CPRA, and say, what is the adverse effect it's going to have on a community that was there before the diversion? And if it's going to affect us in this manner, then take part of that billions and buy us out. Because not only will it raise the elevation, I can also see us having fish kills, contaminated water, and everything else deposited on Myrtle Grove and Wood Park. And this is not acceptable. You know, if you can give us we tried to get a hydraulic study on the effect of surrounding us with a levee from the Corps. We've never gotten that. And I guess we'll never get it from the CPRA. We will learn that we got to have a boat to go to our houses. Those parish streets will be underwater. Thank you.
Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Bartholomew?
Yes, Mr. Lawrence, you can use the analogy of the effects of the diversion, the Mardi Gras Pass, what it did for Point La Hatchery, destroyed a community. It destroyed a way of life. That's evidence, that's facts. So just tell them that.
Thanks, sir.
I also want to thank Reverend George for his presentation. And I heard Mr. Lapine say his eyes is open, and that's great. For 10 years, this conversation just didn't start yesterday. We had a meeting at the Reverend Griffin Community Center where most of the people here were there. People came all the way from Terrebonne Parish and Seminole Parish to talk about this issue. The question is, now that you see, what you going to do? The question is, I heard Councilwoman Salvan, when she talked, the one thing that she said that was the most important thing to the fishermen is that I support you. The fishermen don't want to hear about your eyes open. They want to know, do you support them? We thanking Mr. Lapine for taking on CPR, and we know this council bashed him about how he was in the news going against CPR. You shouldn't be disrespecting of that, because he was on the side of the fishermen. And so we hope that this council, now that your eyes are open, you prove to this community by getting behind President Cormier and getting behind the fishermen and go against the governor and anybody else that's trying to bring this Mid-Barataria diversion into our community.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you back, Mr. Regas.
Sir. Ken Ragas, 1311 Holiday Place, New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm going to give you all a little data. I'm not a fisherman. My grandparents were. But I am more on the more technical and scientific side of this, and I did this little deal for y'all and had it passed out. Anyway, let me just give you the first piece here. Sediment diversion versus pumping, dredging and pumping, okay? The last project that was done on the West Bank that's been completed in 2017 was a Bar Grand Deliort project. They pumped sand, not sand. We don't need sand. They pumped mud. What we need is mud. To do that project, and the bid for the mud was $6 a cubic yard by Weeks Marine. So the CPRA wants to use dredges in the river to compare this, where if you wonder where the land went, like you wonder where the yellow went, what didn't subside went out, and it's all along the Gulf. And there's I think the Corps of Engineers or USGS did a study and ran all along the bank, just 300 or 400 foot out, and did soil samples. And so the mud is there, but they don't want to admit that the $6 cubic yard would be the correct way to compare the diversions. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Regas.
Quick comment.
You will do what, Mr. Cormier?
Just a quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Cormier. Go.
Yeah, I just want to thank Mr. Ken Ragas as well. He provided the a 52-year United States Army Corps of Engineers study of the Fort St. Philip diversion, which was posted, the abstract of which we put on our blackmansparish.com website. And so I want to thank him for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you.
How you doing? Asa Cooper, lifelong parish resident, president of Louisiana Shrimp Association, And we stand behind this because, look, the CPRA, they talk about it. The Corps of Engineers talks about it. We live it every day. You know, we run these marshes. We see what's happening. The Corps of Engineers is one of our biggest problems. They stopping up our, and the parish biggest problem. They let all our passes stop up, so we keep the commerce going out of Southwest Pass. And when they do that, then we can't get out our passes. You can't get commerce back to Venice. We have the recreational fishermen and the commercial fishermen, the shrimpers and the oysters and the finfish. This is our life. You know, Venice is dead now. If you take us out of the low end of this parish, the parish is gone. All you can have is the upper end. So I advise you to stand behind our parish president, and I like to commend him because he's the only one that ever stood up and said, hey, I think y'all right here. We need y'all behind us, and not behind us, in front of us, and help us push this fight to where it needs to be at. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Chairman, councilpersons, thank you so much for your patience and listening to all the information that everybody's brought to you today. You know, and I hate to say it this way, but if we told the state tomorrow that we were going to create a project that was going to eliminate 50% of oil and gas operations in the state of Louisiana, they would throw rotten tomatoes at us as we ran out of the room. But the state's coming to us saying that they want to implement a project, an experimental project into our parish that could eliminate 50% of the landings of the seafood that's landed in this state per year. We should be throwing tomatoes at them as they run out of the room. We shouldn't be the trade-off or the guinea pigs, or should I go ahead and call it what it is, the sacrifice. They keep sat here comments from people saying that, oh, well, the fishermen can just go a little bit further. And I love when they try to relate to us and tell me, oh, well, I went on the back of a boat and worked for my dad to work my way through college. Like they know what we deal with. They don't know what it is to maintain our vessels. I have 6 boats. They don't know what it is to maintain all of the equipment for those vessels, or to have to put a brand new GM or a Cummins or something, a big diesel motor in one of those boats whenever something breaks down. So for them to try to relate to us, to make it like we're friends, so that they can feed us with this with a knife and fork and have us ask for another, is a slap and a spit in the face. For them to come to our parish and try to use the fines that BP had to pay to further impact those that were originally impacted by that incident in 2010 is a direct slap in the face of everybody in this parish and the surrounding parishes, especially our fishermen. You know, I'm really grateful for you guys today because I see that most of you get it. I hope that all of you get it. Without the commercial fishermen in this parish, you know, what is it going to be? We're the longest, most sustainable industry that's ever existed in Plaquemines Parish. You know, and it goes beyond that. Let's go on beyond the commercial fishing families in this parish, and let's talk about the essential fishery habitat. Not only is a nursery home to too many species to list, but that provides, you know, the safety net for the species throughout the entire Gulf of Mexico. I was asked a few weeks ago if the few should outweigh the many by a reporter, to put me on the spot, to try to make me put our little few fishermen in their eyes above the many that this project is supposed to build land to protect. We're not the few, we are the many. We're the direct line of access to a natural resource. We provide a food source to our countrymen throughout this nation. And for too long, other people have painted and framed our picture and made it like we're just these greedy people that destroy everything in our path. And nothing could be further from the truth. We are the true conservationists. Because we have to have this industry year after year after year. This is how we feed our families. My father taught me not to throw so much as a Coke can in the bayou. This is my lifeblood. There's no place else in the world I'd rather be than Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana. And I ask you moving forward, we elected all you guys, somebody in your district, everybody came together, and it's your job to protect people in this parish. That's your job. We're asking you to do your job and to collectively come together, put party lines aside, work together, and protect the people's future of this parish, the whole parish. But keep in mind, this is not just about the commercial fishing industry. You've heard about the lack of the hydrology report. What happens when we elevate that water in the estuary and it comes up against our billion-dollar levee systems, saturates the bottom of our levee? We're going to negate every foot that we've raised those levees with that water level. What happens when we have a storm come into the south end of the Gulf and they haven't shut this thing down in time enough for all that extra water to evacuate our estuary? We're going to negate those extra feet that we've raised our levees. It's a very serious situation, and I really appreciate all of your time today. You guys have a blessed weekend. Thank you.
I don't think there's any better way than to conclude it with that presentation. Mr. Nelson, I really do appreciate you bringing this to the council's attention and putting it on the agenda. It was some good information. I want to also thank our council members for having the patience to go through and really dig into it and listen to what you guys had to say. I also want to thank Council Chair from St. Bernard, Ms. Calais. Thank you for coming. It does mean a lot to us as well that you have an appreciation for what we do in Plaquemines Parish. Thank the parish president. I would like to. Mr. Besham wants to speak? Oh, cue in, Mr. Besham. I don't know you want to speak unless you tell me you want to speak. All right.
If anybody wants to see the true state of what's going to happen, all they have to do is go to Point Lahash, and they'll see there's not much going on at all. It is completely dead. Fishing-wise, trawling-wise, it's terrible. But one thing I want to leave you with is that in 3 years, you can pump in 25,000 acres. And in 20 years, you can, by diversion, and this is Barataria, in 20 years, you'll have approximately 5,000 acres. If you want to build land, just think about those numbers, 25,000 as opposed to 5,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Besham. With that, we will conclude. Thank you all for coming.